Sorry, I changed positions. But yeah, so it's something that would have cost us thousands and thousands of dollars. We would have gone bankrupt. We had money, but we didn't have that kind of money. And even though I was freaking out, I could still think logically. And I knew that Sailor was old. He was like 11 or 12 years old. And is it worth it going bankrupt to, I mean, where do we even get the money? Like how, you know, is it really worth it to spend that much money and possibly ruin our finances, and, you know, our house would probably get foreclosed. I don't know what would happen to save a dog that's probably, if nothing was wrong with him, would probably live maybe another few months or maybe a year. So that day, probably around 3 o'clock in the morning is when, you know, they were talking to us. I had to make the hardest decision of my life, to put it mildly. I don't want to sound like somebody who doesn't feel, or somebody who is uncaring or something, or somebody who doesn't love their dog, because you'll never know the love I had for Sailor. No, I don't think anybody would ever understand what I felt for him. I would do anything to keep him alive, but we just didn't have the money. So, and even if we did have the money, it wouldn't have been worth it. Sailor was already old. And even if we could have done all the procedures they told us to, he would be in pain and he would be suffering, and we would have to go into the vet office once or twice a week to drain the fluid in his abdomen for the rest of his life, however long it is that he's going to live, and he would be really miserable. So I think the answer was pretty clear that Sailor had to die that night. He had to be euthanized. So I told the vet, okay, all right, like, it, you know, I can't do it, but I guess if you need to euthanize him, I know it's time. I'll give you the permission. You can go ahead and euthanize him. So we were still in the room where he got his x-ray. He was on the table. They hadn't moved him after they got the x-ray because, again, if they move him, he could go into cardiac arrest. His situation was that serious. Sailor was cold. I was touching his snout. I was petting him, and it was cold. And Sailor wasn't moving. His legs were dangling off of the x-ray table, and he didn't move them. Normally, if his legs were dangling off of something, he would bring them back, you know, because, you know, he would have been uncomfortable. But he was so far gone that, you know, he wasn't thinking about anything anymore. His eyes were still open. He was still looking at us, but the rest of his body was not moving. He really was in shock. If I had ever seen a case of shock, you know, this was it. My husband was crying. I was crying. I was not hysterical, but on the verge of being hysterical. And it was time for them to euthanize him, and they gave us a few minutes with him. To Sailor, something I would always do, something that Sailor and I shared was, I'm not even a good singer, but I would sing to him all the time. I would sing to him lullabies and stuff, and the moment I started singing, he would start closing his eyes and he would fall asleep. He was so cute. And I had even taken videos of this before and showed people because they didn't believe, you know. It's like, yeah, like as soon as I sing, Sailor's gonna fall asleep, watch. And he always did. And so this day, the day Sailor was gonna die, I started singing him a lullaby. I started singing him that song, Rockabye Baby on the Treetop. Except I would always change the words to Rockabye Sailor, you know, and I think he liked hearing his name. So I sang that song to him, and I was petting him and telling him how much I loved him and how he was the best dog ever, and I don't know how I'm gonna live without him. And I was really sorry that I couldn't do more for him. And we spent our time with Sailor, and it was finally time for him to get put down, so they gave him the shot to put him to sleep, and then they gave him another shot, the euthanasia shot that actually stops his heart. And after a little bit, they confirmed that his heart had stopped and Sailor was dead. So that was the worst day of my life. Seriously, the worst day of my life, the worst thing I've ever died. My aunt died. My grandfather died. And I don't want to sound unfeeling, but I've never hurt like this before. When all these people in my life died, I was sad, yeah, but I didn't cry like this. I never hurt like this before. To put it to you this way, I felt like a mother who had a child, and her child was ripped away from her. And I know I have my son, but I can't see him. I don't know where he went. I can't find him. He's not there anymore. And I feel like a childless mother. That's how I felt. I know people say it's just a dog, get over it, but he was my son. Like, people don't understand, like, he was my baby. He was my whole reason for being, and I would wake up in the morning, and the reason I would even get out of bed was because of Sailor. Like, you know, I had shit to do. I had to walk him, I had to feed him, I had to let him outside. All these things I would do for Sailor. And so, you just understand the gravity of the situation. And I don't want to sound like I'm suicidal or anything. I mean, this happened almost 6 months ago today. But, when Sailor died, I felt like I wanted to die with him. I felt like I wanted them to euthanize me too. I just wanted to be, not because I hate my life or I want to die or anything, but just because I want to be wherever Sailor is. I don't want to know what it's like to live without him ever. Like, he's my whole reason for being. Like, people, you have to understand, he is the light of my life, you know. So it's been really hard getting over Sailor, and something that really surprised me is it really hurt my husband too. My husband cries almost as much as I do. You know, people say it'll get better, but, you know, some days I feel like I'm fine. And yeah, I think about Sailor every single day. Yes, I do. That never changes. But some days I'm actually okay. Like, I can get out of bed and, like, do shit and, like, be productive. I can laugh. I can just be a normal person. But some days I'm just in bed curled up just crying and saying his name and just saying, my baby's gone, my baby died. Like, I'm so, like, distraught about it. And so it's just been really hard to move on from his death. He was the most beautiful dog ever, and I don't know how I'll ever forget about him or move on from him. But it's just been really hard. So yeah, it's been like 6 months that we've been mourning him. In our bedroom, we made him a shrine where he used to go to sleep. We have all his dog beds there, all his things, his leashes, his toys, and the whole wall is nothing but his pictures and his toys, and like everything he ever liked is like all there. So that helped us a little bit, like having a memorial for Sailor. And we always have a candle lit there. For him. Well, it's not a candle, it's like one of the LED candles. But anyway, we always have a light on for him. And I have his ashes in a box. Sometimes, this is gonna sound really weird, but sometimes I sleep with his ashes. And I mean, not like the ashes, but like I sleep like with the box, especially when I'm crying and I feel alone and stuff. Like, I'll hold it, you know, because it helps me feel like I still have him in my arms. We had some of his ashes made into a necklace that we wear sometimes, so he can be close to our heart. And recently, my husband's been realizing how hard it is for me, like, not to have that love and bond and connection I had with my dog. So he's been talking about maybe getting a new dog, a new German Shepherd. And I'm coming around to the idea of it. I like the idea of it. I do want my own dog again soon, maybe Christmas time, not for Christmas, but maybe like, you know, January, something like that. I'm ready to get another dog. I mourn Sailor almost every single day, and I will never get over it, and a new dog will not replace him. But I have this longing and this yearning for that connection that I used to feel with him in the companionship. And so that's where I am in my life right now. So to those of you who have lost your baby, dog, cat, bird, whatever, I want you to know that I truly, truly feel what you're going through, and I am so sorry. And I would like to sit here and say that it's going to get better and it'll go away, but you will never forget them. You could more than the rest of your life. Just know that you love them and that you gave them the best life you could, and they loved you too, and that no one can take that away from you, and always keep them in your heart, okay? Anyway, That's the story.